Okay, starting over. Um, my name is Sue Robinson. I'm married to Gordon, and we moved to Greenville in 1988. We had two children at the time, and I work for Spectrum Health, um, no longer in clinical nursing, but in informatics. So I do all the computer support, training providers how to be efficient in the computer. So my personal background is I was born in Seoul, South Korea. I was 4 years old when I moved to the United States. My mom, actually my stepdad, when he was serving in the Army in Seoul. They moved in together, had my sister was born there, and because his tour of duty was completing, they quickly got married so that we could all move to the United States after he was done. My dad actually lived in Lapeer. His family was from Lapeer, so that's where we landed when we got back to Michigan. And they tried to enroll me in kindergarten, and the school told them that I did not have enough time to assimilate and that they should wait. And so didn't start kindergarten there. In the meantime, we ended up moving to northern Michigan to a small town of Boyne Falls. It's known for its Polish festival. Main Street is 131, heading through it, and there's about 4 blocks to the east. And it has a post office, a school, a gas station, a garage, and about 2 hotels, and that's it. So you can imagine northern Michigan in the late 60s, post-Vietnam. It was pretty rough for me. I was very different from everybody else. And even though we lived a mile from the school, I had to ride the bus. And on the bus, every day, I got picked on. And this bus driver never seemed to notice. And because our school was so small, our graduating class in Boyne Falls, I think, was less than 15 students at the time, we all shared the same recess. And so the same boys that picked on me on the school bus continued at school. And I remember it was Halloween, very excited because we were having, the party and all that. And I got physically bullied on the playground. My nose was massively bleeding. The school nurse couldn't get it to stop, so they called my parents, and they had to come and take me home. So I missed the party, spent the rest of the day on the couch trying to get my nose to stop bleeding, and it took a couple hours. There was no apology from the school, no action plan. They never brought my parents back in to say, okay, this is what we're going to do to stop it. So my parents decided we needed to move and change school districts. So we moved to Boyne City, which was a little bit better, a little bigger town. And fortunately for me, the physical bullying didn't occur in Boyne City, but I still got teased a lot all through school. I was asked, are you Chinese? Well, no, I'm not Chinese. Are you Japanese? No, I'm not Japanese. Are you Vietnamese? No, I'm Korean. No one knew what a Korean was. No one had heard of Korea. And so that was kind of, all through school, elementary school, middle school, and high school. And so in 7th grade, well, actually, I was in 6th grade. My teacher had a really hard time with me. I was the first one to finish my exam, and way before everybody else was. And she was very strict. When you were finished with your exam, you were supposed to sit there with your hands on your desk and wait. And when you finished your exam in 5 minutes and you had to sit there, I couldn't sit still. So I would read. I would find other things to do, and it drove her crazy. So she managed to get me into 7th grade very quickly. So that's where I met Gordon. And Gordon decided, for some reason, that he really liked me. And I wasn't quite sure about him. He was a little intense. And so I kept my distance through middle school. And in high school, I was busy. I mean, I got a job, was working, was focused on school and all that stuff. And so in our junior year, Gordon called me and wanted to know if I wanted to go to Hayride that his youth group was sponsoring. I was not interested in dating. And so I politely told him that, my dad said I couldn't go, and thank you, but no. My dad thought that I needed more of a social life, and he happened to hear this conversation, so he spoke up very loudly and said, no, you don't have anything to do, and I think you should go. Loud enough that Gordon could hear. So I agreed and said yes. And so I went to the youth group with Gordon. We had a great time, and as you know, we are married and dated for 6 years, all through high school, college. I got married 2 weeks after I graduated from nursing school. Gordon and I never dated anybody else. You know, it was just, he knew, and so he convinced me that it was meant to be. I would like to say that marriage is just like the fairy tales. You know, you get married, you have a beautiful wedding, and everybody lives happily ever after, and it is wonderful. Um, it's not. It was a lot of hard work. Um, and I, over the years, have learned that you really need to live by grace in your marriage. And so, just to start out with, the definition of grace, the Christian definition, is love and mercy given to us by God because God desires us to have it, not because we have done anything to earn it or deserve it. You know, He just wants us to have that. And mercy that is in there, along with that definition of grace, is compassionate forgiveness. So I used to make my kids say that they were sorry whenever they, hurt their siblings. And it usually, involved threatening them with no ice cream, chocolate, or whatever. And they would finally say sorry. That's not compassionate forgiveness. Compassionate forgiveness is harder. You really, truly have to want to forgive and to desire it. So grace is love and compassionate forgiveness that we cannot earn or deserve. And you can read this, you can know it in your mind, and you can hear it. But in order to have it impact your life, you have to live it. So the verse that I want to bring up is 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 4 through 7. You guys are probably very familiar with this. I put this on every wedding card, wedding shower card. And it reads, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, it keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, it always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. And I can truthfully say that Gordon and I have failed in every area of 1 Corinthians in our relationship. And to be honest, we did not have very good examples in our parents. So, my mom, she dishonored her family by refusing an arranged marriage when she was a teenager and ran away to the big city of Seoul. And I don't know if you watch Mulan, but when they talk about the Asian culture, it is really true. It is all about honor and respect to your family, to your ancestors. It is a big deal. And what's worse, she ended up becoming pregnant. And so she ended up being a single mom. My biological father was not involved. She actually went to an abortion clinic at the time, and for some reason just couldn't go through with it at the last minute. So she had me, and because she needed to work, she got my great-grandmother to move to Seoul and take care of me so that she could work, and she worked hard. And she, by all means, was very, very successful. She ended up sending her two sisters to trade school and put my uncle through college or high school before she moved to the United States. And because of that, my aunts then worked and paid for my uncle's college, and he went on to engineering school. And this was really important because my mom's family was very poor, and only by going through school could you hope to have enough money to support your family. And so, she lived in Seoul for a while, and then she met my dad, and they got married, and they came to the United States. So at the time, she spoke very little English. And if you know anything about learning a second language, the easiest words to learn are the swear words, and being near the military base. She knew how to swear in English, but that was about it. I was bilingual, but even with that, it was hard for my mom. She had to assimilate to just a different way of life. Cooking was different, the food was different. In northern Michigan, there was no Oriental market that she could go and at least get some of the same foods. So we spent weeks learning how to make pancakes, and we ate pancakes 3 times a day while she learned how to do it right. And even though she worked hard in Korea and had jobs, she was not allowed to work when she got here to the United States. My dad was a drummer in a country band, and he stayed out late a lot, playing in the bars, playing at weddings, and if he wasn't playing, he was, practicing, and so it was not unusual for him to not come home until 3 or 4 later in the morning. And I remember one day, when I was 8 years old, my mom brought me and said, "Hey, I found something, I need you to read it." And so she gave me a piece of paper. She had found it in my dad's pants pocket, and I read the note out loud to her. And she was 7 months pregnant with my brother, and I had to read the note to tell her that my dad was cheating on her at that time. So, not working, not speaking English, she was stuck. There was nothing she could do. So she burned the note, and she was really just dependent on my dad. And before I went to college, I made sure that she completed her GED so that she at least had a high school diploma. I made sure that she got her driver's license. My dad was totally against all of this, but I pushed and pushed, and with the help of a friend who offered to help her with the drive. I couldn't get in the car with my mom to teach her how to drive, so got someone else that did that. She did run into the garage learning, but she at least had some independence. And eventually she did end up joining the workforce and got jobs and worked because my dad had severe Crohn's disease and ended up on disability. And so in spite of all of this, they remained married until my dad passed away in 2009. And I really struggled with that for a long time, all through high school and college, thinking, wow, why? Why? So Gordon's parents, his parents met when they were in college. His dad was Protestant, his mom was Catholic. And they got married very quickly after they started dating. And as you can imagine at that time, that was a big deal. Catholics and Protestants didn't get together. And then Gordon was born 2 months premature. And so his parents never celebrated their anniversary, never talked about it. I mean, they had wedding pictures, but it was never celebrated or anything. And they never really talked about it. And life was hard. They were in school, they were trying to finish up, had no money. And so finally, when they finished their student teaching, they managed to move back up to Boyne City, but had to live with his grandparents. His grandparents bought a trailer and they set it up behind their house. And as you can imagine, a lot of fighting when you're under financial stress. And Gordon took a brunt of a lot of that initially growing up. Finally, his parents, they had enough money. They found a beautiful piece of property through a lot of hard work. They built their house and built a farm. And so when I met Gordon, his parents were both teaching full-time as school teachers and running a dairy farm. But even though the Robinson family name was very well respected in Boyne City, they were hard workers. His grandpa was on the church board. His dad was physically and verbally abusive at home. And so they had a nice facade, but when you really went to their house and got to know them, there were other things going on. And I was really embarrassed at times to see how his dad spoke to his mom and treated his mom in my presence. And I'm thinking, wow, really, really struggled with that. And Gordon, even until we were married in our 20s and 30s, when there was a confrontation with his dad, he would literally shake in his boots because of his childhood. Um, and his parents remained married until his mom died of cancer in October of 2010. And again, I thought, wow, why did she stay with him? Why didn't she leave? I don't know that I could have done that. And so Gordon and I got married in August of '85. In our wedding pictures, our parents aren't smiling. It was a little tense, and I really wondered, should we get married? And Gordon convinced us, yes, we need to get married, that our love was true, and we would get through this. And I think the best thing for us is that we didn't stay in Boyne City. We moved away. Gordon got a job in Owasso. But of course, that caused a lot of issues. So Gordon's parents didn't pay him for the work he did that summer before we got married. So he had no money. We got married, and he literally had no money. I had to pay for the license. I had to pay for his ring. And we took the money from our wedding to pay our bills. But we got moved to Owasso. He was working on a dairy farm. And, being young, we were in love. Everything was great. And then we had our first fight. Our first fight was over a color TV. The Olympics were going to be in Seoul, South Korea, and my mom was very excited. And my dad's colorblind, so we never had a color TV. And my mom had mentioned that it would be so cool to see the Olympics and see the opening ceremony in color, because it's very colorful. Their clothing is very colorful. So I thought, Gordon and I are working. I'm working as a nurse. We've got money. We can afford a TV. Gordon didn't think so. But I dug in my heels, and I insisted and went through with it. I bought my mom and dad a color TV so she could watch the Olympics. So we fought about that TV for probably the next 15 years. Every time that we had a fight that dealt with finances or money, that TV came up. And over the years, we've discovered that when we fight, it's usually over money, kids, or because one of us is really tired. I turn into a lawyer, I drill him with questions, and I back him up into a corner. Gordon has to take a couple days to process, and then he comes back with a rebuttal, but I've already thought I won. And so our fights kind of go like this. I do not need the stress in my life. I can take care of myself. I do not need a man to survive. And why do you say no to everything? And stop yelling at me. And Gordon, when he fights, he's like, why can't you respect my decisions? Why don't you love me? My parents never did that for me. I am not yelling. This is how it's gone for 35 years of our marriage. It still comes up today, and I think we still follow the same format. But there was a turning point. Through all these arguments and tears, we have both experienced incredible heartache that we inflicted on each other. Some of it was on purpose, and some of it happened without even realizing the amount of damage that we were doing emotionally and spiritually. I came across a book. It's called Love and Respect, The Love She Needs, or the Love She Most Desires, The Respect He Desperately Needs by Emerson Eggerichs. That is an incredible book, and I think every couple should read it because it really opened my eyes to our relationship, how we were dysfunctional, how love needs to be affirmed in different ways. For Gordon, because of the way he grew up, his parents never told him that they loved him because of him. They loved him because he was a hard worker. They loved him because he could drive a tractor. He could bale hay. He would get up at 4 o'clock and milk the cows. They loved him because he could produce and do things. But they never just said, Gordon, I love you. You're a great kid or a great person. So he needed that in his life, and I didn't realize that. I said I loved you when we got married. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't be here. I'm still here, right? Why do I need to keep saying it? But it was really important for him to have that. And for me, my need was to be respected, to be considered that I could maintain my independence. And so I would say things like, I don't need a man to survive. if you left or if I divorced you, I could make it. Um, and that was very, very hurtful to Gordon. And it caused a lot of issues because he always thought that I was going to run away someday. After one of our fights, that I would just pack up my bags and leave. And I never had that intention. And because of my parents' background, um, infidelity was huge. I remember telling Gordon, if you ever cheat on me, that's it. You're done. I can't forgive that. I would never forgive that. And not that we ever had to deal with that issue in our marriage at all, but that was the one thing that I hung on to, was that if he ever cheated on me, there's no way it would be done. Um, and then also, after reading this book, Gordon and I had a fight. I can't even remember what we were fighting about, but it was pretty hard. And I was thinking, it would just be easier if I was just by myself, if I didn't have a husband to deal with. And I worked in Grand Rapids, so spent a lot of time commuting back and forth. And during my commutes, I would listen to Family Life Radio. And one morning, the next day, I was driving home and listening to this talk show. And it was about a woman whose husband cheated on her. And she was telling her story. And it was gut-wrenching. There was a lot to it. And they ended up staying married. And I'm thinking, wow. How could anyone choose to do that? And what really got me was what she said at the very end is, let me find the exact quote. It's what happens when you have too many papers. Okay. So she ended the talk show with a statement saying, "Infidelity is a sin like any other sin. It is no less or worse. Jesus forgives all sin equally. Jesus forgives us even when we do not deserve it and we cannot earn it. Jesus does this for me, so how could I not do this for my husband if I say I'm a follower of Jesus?" And that really got my attention because, I believe that Jesus forgives all sins. I believe that as a Christian, but it had me thinking, am I really a follower of Jesus if I have a list of never could I forgive Gordon if fill in the blank? And it got me thinking. It's like those don't really align. And so, I think with grace, what I struggled with is that, when you don't have that massive conversion like Saul did, he was blinded for all the bad things that he did, and then God gave him his sight and the opportunity. So could you imagine that kind of experience? Well, Gordon and I never really had that experience. So Gordon and I grew up on the opposite ends of town, both literally and figuratively. My family was a bar hopping, beer drinking, swearing, smoking, never went to church family. And I was kind of like the ugly duckling. Even as a kid, I never fit in with any of that. From a very early age, my parents knew I hated cigarette smoke, couldn't stand the smell of beer. I didn't ever swear, didn't like it when they swore. And I had always wanted to go to church, but my parents didn't want to go to church. It was full of hypocritical people. And Gordon's family didn't do any of that. They didn't swear, they didn't smoke, they didn't drink alcohol, they didn't even play cards or dance. And they always went to church. And so, spiritually, Gordon and I never really did anything bad. We were both kind of rule followers. We followed the rules, we did the right things. We attended youth group, went to church, taught Bible, VBS, Sunday school, and when we started a family, we went to church regularly and did all the right things. And so we've never experienced or really had a great need for a lot of grace in our lives. But, looking back and really understanding what grace is, and having the example of my mom and my mother-in-law live grace in their marriage. You know, even though my parents didn't go to church, um, and my mom stayed. She chose to stay with my stepdad. She could have left him when she started working and was financially stable, but she didn't. She chose to stay in that marriage and take care of my dad in his failing health. And Gordon's mom, same thing. She chose to stay in her marriage. Um, she never complained. She never got bitter. She was always generous and forgiving. And I was finally able to understand that, you know, my stepdad and Gordon's dad never deserved that compassionate forgiveness. Um, but it was a conscious choice by my mom and my mother-in-law to live um, their marriage that way. And so if I finally then understood that if I was a follower of Jesus and my sins were forgiven and I wanted and desired that in my life, that I had to embrace that in my marriage, and to not have a list of exceptions that I could never forgive Gordon if he did blank, fill in the blank. Um, and so that is really when I took this passage in 1 Corinthians and really tried to live it out daily. Um, you know, letting go of patterns is hard. Um, it's hard work. It doesn't happen overnight. Um, Gordon and I still fight. Um, there are times when we do go to bed angry and we're not talking to each other. Um, we don't fight about the TV anymore, but there are other things that come up repeatedly in our fights. Pride is what makes us dig in our heels to prove that we are right and the other person is wrong. And unfortunately, honesty in a relationship doesn't always bring warm, fuzzy feelings. It causes more pain. Um, and but through all of this, through our marriage, we have really learned to both actively live out grace, um, and to survive. And I think it is really important. And I want people to know that, you know, there's always hope. So, are you struggling in your marriage? Is your relationship with a child not what you wanted or expected? Do you have family members that you don't, or friends that you don't speak to because of an argument or past wrongs committed? If you answer yes to any of these, please, for emotional and spiritual well-being, seek help and take action. I can't promise a happy ending, but don't let the world, Facebook, convince you that there's no hope for grace. Satan would have you believe that it is hopeless, not worth your time or energy, or that you never could forgive someone for blank, and you can fill in the blank. But Jesus would say otherwise. He sacrificed himself for each and every one of us, and his grace is more than sufficient for any and all of our sins, both great and small. So, how do you live by grace? Let me give you a couple of pointers. Be gentle and kind in what you say and how you say it. In this world today, this is so important. Look for ways to meet someone else's needs every day. And it can be a small action, but sometimes those small actions have the most lasting impact in a person's life. Let it go. Will you even remember this incident, this fight, this issue, this problem next month, in a year, 5 years, 10 years? I can honestly say when I sat down to write this, I thought that I'd have a page full of all the arguments that we had. And other than the TV, I really couldn't think of anything major that we have fought over. Forgive and learn to ask for forgiveness. Asking for forgiveness is really hard because most people think that when you ask for forgiveness, that is admitting defeat and that you are wrong. And let me tell you, that is not the case. Asking for forgiveness is acknowledging that you have hurt the person, that you have caused pain, or that you have added to the misunderstanding, and it allows you to step back and really address the problem. It doesn't mean that you're wrong or you're admitting that you're wrong. Be grateful. There's always something to be glad about in your day. And switching your mind to what you have takes it away from what you don't have. Be optimistic. Um, we talk about a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset at work. And a fixed mindset tells you that you can't change. People can't change. There's nothing you can do about it. This is it. This is the way it is. A growth mindset is, oh, that was not pleasant, but the person can change. We can change. We can make this better. We can learn from this. How do I take this experience and grow from it and learn to handle it better the next time? And that growth mindset, if you can acknowledge the times when you fall into that fixed mindset of this is just the way it is versus how can we change this? It will help you to be stronger, more optimistic, and a word that is floating, or a buzzword, have grit. And then last of all, do not give up. Do not give up. In any relationship, it takes work, and both people in that relationship have to desire to work towards a resolution. And so let me preface that, is that people have to want to make change. They have to want to fix the solution. So that's part of it. But don't give up too easily. I think today's culture, it's so easy to just give up. Throw it out, start out new. It's easier. But there is some rewards in sticking it out, working through the troubles. So let me end with choosing to live by grace as a conscious decision to let love and mercy, or compassionate forgiveness, be the foundation of your relationship with your spouse, kids, family, friends, coworkers, and even strangers, even if they do nothing to earn it or deserve it. And so let's go back to 1 Corinthians. And this is something that I learned when I was teaching Bible study in college for InterVarsity. And this helps me to make God's message more personal as I read it. So if you take 1 Corinthians 13:4-7 and you read it like this: I am patient, I am kind, I do not envy, I do not boast, I am not proud, I am not rude, I am not self-seeking, I am not easily angered, I keep no record of wrongs, I do not delight in evil, but rejoice with the truth. I always protect, always trust, always hope, and always persevere. And so maybe by changing how you read God's word, will make it more personal and make it easier to apply it to your life so that you can truly live your life by grace. Thank you.